Hey everybody, thanks for making the trip down or up or whatever way you came today. I see a lot of people from north and south, so that's fun, and a few from the east. I'm Nathan Beard. I'm the curator here at the WERK Gallery. We are a 3-year-old gallery. I've seen many of you in our object lab, which is a very interesting and eclectic mix of things. But in this space, and we also have a small gallery which we call the Gabinetto. We host curated shows like this, and then we have 4 calls for art every year. So we're very much a community-minded gallery. If you're an artist, we encourage you to submit work to our shows. I'm just going to hype up a few things before we get started here. We have this book by Philomena Marano and her partner Richard Egan. It's a very interesting account about the revitalization of the environment. And if you'd like to buy it, there's several copies on the pedestal back here. We also have a great show coming up in August. Actually, 2 shows. I don't know if any of you are familiar with St. Pete Ceramics. They are a local pottery collective housed just down the road here. Were housed until their studio burned down earlier this year. So we are having a fundraising exhibit for them this coming month. And we are having a coffee and dessert with the artists. They have made a limited edition mug that is part of the festivities. So it'll be a talk like this, but we'll have treats, and you take a mug home.
That's so cute.
And in our Gabinetto, we'll have a PCCA alum, Audrey Tiravasi. It is her first solo show. She stepped away from art to manage her family's restaurant for years and years, and now she's back into art. And so we're very much about supporting artists in that way too. Please don't miss the show in the back if you haven't seen it already. It's by LA-based artist Quasi Boy Golden. He is a photographer by trade. He's been documenting the changes in LA for 20+ years. He grew up in Koreatown, and he's got this new body of work which we're helping debut, which is a mixture of paint and photography. So now to the main show. First, I think we'll have Philomena speak about her amazing papier-collé works. She has an incredible background, and as you can see, has done a lot of really fun work in the past. We have some locally relevant imagery with circus imagery. We have a lot of her work from Coney Island, all the signs and the rides. And then we have this wonderful flat fix series back here, which is just a kind of a fun walk around the neighborhood. So Philomena, please tell us more about your work and your career.
Okay, when Nathan contacted me for this exhibit, he said, let's take a few from each of the series. So that's what we have: the Coney Island, the flat fix, the contemporary circus, and the Wonder City, the aquatic pieces. Now all of them have papier-collé or cut paper on them. Some of them are all cut paper. But each one has a little bit of a different direction. But I should talk to you about how I make these pieces. I use colorized paper. Whoever went to art school would know what that is. Okay? It's a paper that's screen printed with ink on one side and none on the other. And I actually transfer my drawing onto the back of that paper, and I cut the forms and paste them to a board. So every color that you see is a different piece of paper that's glued on to the background. I know that people walk into the gallery and they look at the work and they not really sure what they're seeing. It could look like a print to them, a painting, or not really positive, and boom, all of a sudden, the funhouse door swings open, that's the boom in the title, and you start looking for the cuts on the edges of the pieces. Did anybody experience that? Probably at least. So I want to talk a little bit about how I began cutting paper. It's a great story. It began at Robert and Deon's studio in New York. Robert and Deon is the preeminent artist who did the love painting and the love sculpture, stacked letters. I was hired to be an artist. No, I was hired to be a studio assistant, and that meant feeding the cats, cleaning the litter, going to the store, making lunch for the other assistants, and I'll call him Bob because that's what we did for Bob. And that was it for a while. And one night we all went to see Three Penny Opera downtown. 2 assistants and Robert and Deon. And I took out my sketch pad and I'm sketching the people on stage in costume. And someone comes behind me, it's Bob, and he said, Philomena, can you cut as you can sketch? And I said, oh, I can cut. I felt very confident about that because I did go to art school. I studied in high school art and design, and we had a lot of advertising classes and board work, so I was good at things actually grade. Plus my father was a stripper. Yeah, I mean, in the world of offset printing. So I know that I inherited, I got the gene of color from him. And what we were working on was a large production for the Santa Fe Opera called The Mother of Us All, written by Gertrude Stein, and music by Virgil Thompson. This was 1976. And Robin and Deon was commissioned to design the sets and costumes for that specific play. So everything has to be done to the cut paper because his concept was the early American cutout. The story was about Susan B. Anthony gaining the women's rights to vote, fighting for that. And we had about 37 costumes, and then the floats. And there were 6 floats, and they were very ornate. So as each day progressed, there was more and more details that I needed to cut into these floats. They were like political platforms with flowing flags, and the ship of state, and all kinds of ornate objects on them. There was Susan B. Anthony's living room, which had Victorian couches, chandeliers, printed rugs, and I was cutting. Okay, and all of that time I fell in love with colored paper. That's what it is. And it triggered something for me. Memories of my childhood in Coney Island. I hadn't been there probably since I was 12 because the neighborhood had gone down, as everybody said. So here I am waiting for the project to be over because I knew that I was going to incorporate this paper into my own personal. There was also something, Indiana had paintings of words and numbers all throughout the studio, his 4-floor studio on the Bowery. And I learned from him that he was embedding childhood memories and also universal observations. And I said to myself, wait a minute, I have my signs too, and they're from Coney Island. So I took off and I went there, and I was blown away by the decay. I just couldn't believe the parachute jump was tilted on its side. The parachute jump was Brooklyn's Eiffel Tower. There was it was in terrible shape. And at the same time, I found it very inspiring, though, walking around and seeing signs that I knew from childhood, but faded and falling apart. And you could say it was nostalgic, but it was far beyond nostalgia. You know, even though amusement parks that are fading could be, but not this one. Anyway, I started doing the cut paper series on Coney Island, and maybe a few years later I met another artist who was just as hysterical as I was about the condition of Coney Island, and we formed the Coney Island Historical Society. And what we did was we just reached out to people, to anyone. We published a newsletter. We sat on empty street corners with some props that we made, calling people to come back to Coney Island, even though they lost faith in it. We renovated, this is the best project, we renovated an old dark ride called the Dragon's Cave, and we turned it into something unprecedented, a ride-through gallery in the dark. We invited artists in to do installations, and we had 8 cars, you know, big old massive cars that were good. We had 8 different artists paint cars in their own style. And we had that going for about a year, and sadly enough, we had to close because there was a fire in Great Adventure where some teenagers lost their lives, and the fire department came down on us, and the owners of the building, Nathan's Famous, did not want to pay for a high policy. So that was that. But after Historical Society, well, I have a book written about all of our adventures. I kept going with cut paper, and when we moved to Florida, I thought I was going to be making cut paper pieces of exotic plants and underwater scenes, but I started looking online and I found something like this. This is the Global Thunder, and it's the famous nerveless Knox. They're popular locally. The nerveless Knox family. And I was just in love with it. It seemed like it was a ride from Coney Island. Okay, so I took it a step further, and I did the Vortex of June. I know the names are really kind of negative. And this one is the High Flyer. It's a bungee jump, of course. And this is the Skywalker. And this is the wheels, sky wheels. That's it. Okay. The Flatfix pieces, which are over here, is a series of 12. And the inspiration from these comes from my daily trek to my studio in Brooklyn, from where I lived in Brooklyn. I took a few subway stops, and my studio was in a really dreary, lofty kind of neighborhood. So when I came up out of the subway, and I was on the sidewalk, the air was as stagnant on the outside as it was in the subway station. And I walked to my studio, and one day I took a detour, and what I found was a little Flatfix shop with yellow and red decorations. It was like a little carnival, and it lit up the street. You know, it really made my day. And the next day, from the station, I took another detour around another block, and I found another Flatfix shop, and I realized that the neighborhood was peppered with these little places. And I said, I'm going to do a series, but in a different direction. And I decided to distill what they really were. Okay, not much detail, fewer cut-out shapes, but just enough so the viewer could maybe complete the image themselves. Wonderful donuts. And like that, so that's Flatfix or tire shop, you call it either. Okay. And the aquatic pieces, or we could say the learning to see, small W, large U. They're way at the end. And in this series, I started experimenting with mixing paint and paper. These are paint and paper on wood. And they're treated with the matte medium, so nothing will peel off. And I continue with polyaria. This is called Wind in Your World. And it's a tondo, or like a tondo. And I mix cut paper, print, and wood, painted wood. There's one important thing though I wanted to say about the work, is that you might come into a gallery and see my work, see a papier collé, and not know that it's paper. It could be a print, it could be painted, and all of a sudden, boom, the panoster opens. That's the title of the show. And you start reading through the piece yourself and wondering, where does this start, where does this head start, where does this head end?
Does anyone have any questions? I do.
I saw good exposure and so incredibly detailed, and I'm curious, a technical question, what kind of glue do you use?
I ordered from Talus. Talus is like a library supplies company. It's a white glue, it's actually free. That's what I use. And how I put it on, you can't even think about asking.
I do wonder that because they're so delicate, and one person to lay it out without wrinkling or.
Every piece starts with a sketch, say yay big. Okay. Then I clarify that sketch with a hard pencil line, so it's a really clear line drawing. Then I have them enlarged at any kind of a blueprint face. Okay, yay big. Then I trace it again on a sheet of vellum, so I have this pencil drawing. And from there, I trace sections of it onto the back of my colored paper and cut. And decide on where the pieces are going. Okay, so I start with the first level, right? Then mid-level, then detail on the top. Now, as far as gluing goes, a large piece like this piece of sky, I'll take a roller and roll the glue out. But the glue curls immediately. So I take little push pins on a piece of cork, and I push them in, without poking a hole in the paper. Let it dry. Once it's totally dry, I apply it to my board, and I use an acid-free adhesive-free paper over to iron it into a little iron. So the process is really intense. There's a lot of navigating. If I didn't have my tracing, I would feel like a pirate when we see it in the direction.
And another technical so oftentimes when you're working with glue and collage, the glue will bleed out, and then you'll see like a sheen on the so how do you keep it clean?
Very thin pieces, I use a Q-tip carefully and roll it on. But coloring is really wonderful because you just wash it. I don't mean really wash it, but you can get a Q-tip with some cold water and take that glue off the edge. Yeah. Then it dries.
And then the longer, delicate strips, do you do them in sections, or because they look like a solid?
Yeah, sometimes they're long and solid, and sometimes the drying process gets a little bigger. And sometimes they're in sections. It's really, I would say don't even start trying.
You're the only one.
I don't know if you told everybody about those springs, but the windshield, you can hammer those springs. Did you tell anybody?
The pieces here by the camera are portraits of signs that exist in Holy Island, or exist in Montana. And they're not just directional signals for rides. If you go deeper, it can be universal meaning, like safe level ride, no ups or downs, don't we all want that? You know, we all know that the winners get good choice and all that kind of stuff. But they are framed in boardwalk wood, okay? When Superstorm Sandy hit New York, the boardwalk in the port certain areas. So these two young gentlemen were making a business out of the boardwalk wood, and they asked me what I wanted, and we've been paid, so. And if you get really close, you can almost smell the sauce about the boardwalk.
So you live here now. You live here now.
Yeah.
Do you miss?
2017, of course.
Did you go back on?
Not that often. I was there recently for a book signing. The book there tells all stories, family stories, and all the projects that we did for revitalization. We were called the Artist Renaissance of the 1980s. And we're really, we stayed in Coney Island from the nosedive. It was that serious. And then, of course, other people took over and other developers came in, etc. But we were there at a crucial point where probably could have been done any other way. Yeah, that's nice.
So, I mean, those full sheets are called.
When I started these, I know that the pieces are 18 by 24, 22 by 36.
Right.
But sometimes my work will require longer than 36. So what I have to do is cut, for instance, cut the piece and know that my clown is going to overlap it. So before I actually do bin cutting, when I have that master tracing done, I'm figuring out how I'm going to do this in steps and how it will organize, right? Artwork I keep writing on. My steps that I'm going to take. Yeah. So there's a lot of strategy involved. As I said, like a pirate with a map. If I don't have that map, I could never put anything in the place that it goes. Because what I do is I make something like a slip sheet. My tracing is taped to the top of my board. Okay, so I could lift it like this, and I can take a piece I just cut. I move it around and see where it's going to fit, right knee, the tracing. Okay? So everything needs to find this position, otherwise I can never do anything like this. Unless I go abstract. Then I'll be safe.
Just an observation. It just seems it's so integrated because you're technically it's so strategic and precise, and like if you have the acrobats here, one must assume they're totally focused, like you're completely focused. But on the other hand, you're talking about you get to the piece, and then you're wondering. A viewer may wonder what's over and what's under. Is this glued on, or is this underneath, and where's it going, and what is that? And
What is it, right?
what is it? But because the overall feeling, despite the focus of the person, it seems to be like a wandering fluidity.
And that happens with line also.
Yes, that's
line
what I'm saying.
is
It's the same
ultra
thing.
important in my work because I call this drawing with an exact line. Right? Yeah, it really is. For painting, the coloring paper is my palette, and the knife and the tweezers are my tools. Yeah, you're right. It's kind of like the feeling of hang on, I'm still hanging on.
It's fluid.
There's no room, and actually for me, there's no room for mistakes when I want to do this piece. No. Oh, I didn't talk about the clouds, I'll just do that briefly. When we moved to Sarasota, I realized the clouds were incredible. To me, they looked like they came up from the ground, like skyscrapers, so I incorporated that feeling into this piece, just to make it personal.
Really heavy, strong, heavy clouds.
Yes.
Did you design your necklace?
Yes, the little parachute man. That's another thing.
And that's the Robert and Deon.
This I bought in Sorrento, most of the things I brought in. My husband Eugene here, we saw it in a window.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Did you say, wait a minute, is that paper? Is that paste? No, I believe it's probably screen printed on the leather.
There you go.
I know. Thank you. What?
I'd just like to say one thing to the crowd is that what hasn't been said is that her work works through one word, it's called transcendence.
Yeah.
So it means something to everybody, and that comes out in the book as well. We all transcend at different points in our lives, and all these memories are parts of our transcendence.
That's what Coney Island is actually. We go there to transcend. Anybody else say something?
Well, thank you, Philomena.
Yes, they do. But I don't go
It's a friend of mine, that's why.
I like them all amplified.
Yeah, discuss
Okay.
Next we'll have our ceramicist, Deon Blackwell, speak about his work. There's each one of these pieces have a very interesting story. And in pairing these two artists, is at first glance maybe, what are these people doing together? But in approaching both of them, I was drawn to their saturated colors and use of words, and their work kind of tied them together superficially. But on a deeper note, we're here to hear all the stories behind the work, and it's got this sense of nostalgia, or even deeper than nostalgia, in memories through storytelling. And so Deon's stories for these works is fairly interesting and humorous, but also with a tinge of, well, I'll let him tell the stories, but with a tinge of danger or regret. So Deon, would you please come on up here and introduce yourself?
I'm Deon Blackwell. I'm originally from Pensacola, Florida, so I'm a Floridian. My first art was not 2D or 3D, it was music. I actually grew up in the music world, and I went to undergrad for music and performance and jazz and things like that. And I actually got to perform with the likes of B.B. King. I played in the Crossroads of Mississippi. That's where I got my undergrad degree, was in Mississippi. So music was my first escape from my world, and then art came a little bit later. But the word I think that is appropriate for my work is escape, because you'll read them in the little stories as well, the pieces, but I can kind of give you a background that Pensacola was a very, let's say, traditional place, and my family specifically was, well, you'll see that the arts were not really welcome within the household. It was more, what are you doing towards getting a job, to go out to make money, to do the different things. So when I would come to someone and say, I'm really enjoying music, and I buy an instrument and I play music, then that became a fight, an argument, and then the arts would be pushed down for a while. It would never go away from me, so I kept fighting to get, my first instrument was a trombone, which cost me $500, which was a lot of grass cutting, but I bought my first instrument. I took all these things in music and I worked it into full ride scholarships to go out of state. So the second I turned 18, I was as far away as I could financially get. So, but it's kind of interesting that the things you fight against when you're young tend to work their way back when you're a little bit older, and especially when you have a child of your own. I find myself going through the scenarios that you'll see in these pieces and seeing how I respond to my daughter. Am I doing anything that causes these issues with her? So for my family, it was drugs and alcohol and lots of abuse. Was prevalent through my whole upbringing and my siblings' upbringing. When I got out of it and I look back, it's how I want to talk about those scenarios with my creative artwork. So since my daughter came around, I think sarcasm is my normal one to talk to people about these things. But for example, I'll give you a scenario for each and you can see how I'm trying to communicate. These two pieces here are the newest pieces that I've been working on. And I wanted to make a container for specific memories. But I thought it would be funny if I made the container not be able to hold anything. So the pieces can spill out at any point. This piece specifically, when you are poor and your parents don't want to spend money, they don't want to spend money on tooth care or dentistry. So I have a vivid memory of doing a root canal without sedation. So in your mind, you probably never want to go to the dentist again. So for my whole life, I've had issues with dental work and things like that. So yes, I can remember that scenario. And inside are my sensitive teeth. They're not real. They're artificial. But this is where I keep my sensitive teeth because I know that I'm really sensitive about my teeth and the scenario I went through. So that's the container for them. And the piece back here, so you're a young kid, yeah. The root canal was 9 or 10. I'm gonna say 10. And that's another thing is that memories kind of have this way of flowing into other things, and trauma specifically will make you forget entire time periods. So I can't plug memories to everything time-wise. I just remember the things that stand out vividly. So I remember the exact location of the root canal. I know the pain and the sound of the beeping of the tool that they use for a root canal. I know all that stuff, and I've had discussions with my dentist about these kind of things. I have to be fully sedated into the building. Not just dentistry, but when I go in, they know I'm a different kind of case. So. It only helps a little because I still think about it constantly. The piece right back there, as a kid with bad teeth, we had Fruit Loops in that. Well, the cheapest cereals were the sugary cereals, the terrible ones. But in the bottom of those wonderful cereals were little toys. And I would just, the second we got a new cereal, I would reach through the entire cereal, rip out the toy before my siblings could get it, and I would have a toy. One of my favorite toys out of the cereal boxes was Wacky Wall Walking Octopus out of the cereal box. You can't find the originals because the company's gone under, but they sold them to another company. I tracked them down, and I actually ordered the original company's molds, and those are the real ones from my childhood. So it took me forever to find them, but I bought as many as I could. And that container, the regret. That one is all about regret. Because when I would pull that toy out, I would ruin the box. Because you pull the cereal out, and then I would get yelled at for stealing the toy from the other siblings. Then I would have to eat the entire box of cereal. Not unlimited, but so the regret of like messing up the box but still getting the toy. So that's what the containers is about. And then little other pieces here are about specific scenarios. So I learned ceramics when I was in grad school, and I started learning all the processes behind it. And there's a whole lot of science behind ceramics. And I like using it and I like hiding it. So there's a lot of things in there that you can't see that I'm intentionally not letting you see. Because I don't want you to see precision. I don't want you to see my technique. That doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is the conversation that happens with the piece and the person looking at the piece. So like this piece right here, this goes back to my mother here. The PFFT is the sound that I heard, and I remember exactly where I was and everything when I said I'd like to be in marching band. Because marching band means a uniform, which costs a couple $100, and a new marching horn, and that equals a lot of money. And at that time, that's not going to happen. So I remember saying that to her, and remember hearing, why are you wasting all this money on this stuff? You're never going to go anywhere and use it. That's not going to take you anywhere. Eventually she came around. Eventually I paid for half my uniform myself. I did orange sales, I think, at that time. They were doing, band fundraisers. I sold oranges to all the neighbors. But I got my second instrument. I got into the marching band in high school. And it did take me all the way through college because, all my music scholarships got me through college. So I wanted to make something silly at the same time as pretty serious, because that sound effect that she made doesn't go away in my head. So I made this object trying to make the sound. So that's what the little silicone things are on the side. I know it's silly, but it's... What is that feeling when someone scoffs at everything that you want? It's like you have a creative direction. What does it look like when someone just destroys it with sound? That's what it looks like right there, to me. The piece to the back there was kind of a better memory, but at the same time, it's still in the same territory. The crab legs piece. My aunt and I would go, my mom worked at the Church's Chicken, that restaurant, right? She was a manager there, and every day when they started throwing the chicken away, she would collect it up and she would give it to all of us, and we'd go to the bridge, and we'd tie a string on the end of the chicken, throw it under the bridge and catch crabs, and we'd just pull it up with strings on little nets. Apparently so. They're scavengers, so they'll eat anything that's close to them just long enough for you to catch them. Because it's right on the rocks and everything in the bridge. So we would catch crabs, and my aunt would make a handwritten sign every day that we'd go catch the crabs. It would just say crab legs. And she'd shove it on the side of the bridge, and we'd sell everything we caught, that day. So people would see the crab leg sign. I tried to make it look exactly the same way she would write it, including misspellings and things like that. So the text on my pieces are direct to things that I think link me to the memory. So the object themselves can kind of come and go, but the text kind of gets that memory when it's a little fuzzy. But I remember seeing those crab leg signs, in my head, and having to clean crabs and sell them on the side of the road when I was 10 or 12, sometimes younger. But that's what those kind of pieces are. It's directly linking to a memory. And then I think my favorite memory, and it's one that I can show everybody a picture later, but the one in the window is her glorious mullet. That one is a direct link to my mother. My mom in her old age, I'm one of 4 children with 4 fathers. She kind of sort of franchises the different kids. And towards her older years, I don't think she ever really grew up. She never got past that early 20 range. So she thought that a breast enhancement was the right way to go to find another man. She changed her hair. She tried to do lots of expensive clothing. And she had a silver mullet. I can't describe it any better than like a perfect mullet that was just pure silver. And I always thought that it was ironic that the person that would always tell me that something isn't worth doing and all this stuff is a person that was the most artificial about everything that she was doing. And so the piece actually has artificial flowers, things I think that she would love. I tried to shape it into the shape of a mullet. It was pretty glorious. So the glorious mullet title came without even having to think about it. So I never got along with her. So the day she died, we were 2 different humans, although I knew that she was my mother, and I never got along with any kind of solution that she ever came up with. So it's like knowing the most intimate thoughts about a person you've never met, except she is, your mother at the same time. So that's what that piece is about. I always kind of think about that when I have a picture of her. The one and only time she ever came into an art show. She did come to one of my art shows, and she took a picture, she's screaming, happy face, and it's a picture of her, and that's kind of what that mullet shape is about. So And the last pieces down there are a little bit different. They came about from the squats, yeah. I have this compulsion to do multiples of everything I do. If I do one, I need to do three. If I do three, I think 10 is about right. And if I do 10, 100 seems to be relevant. So, and it's not just repetition. It's more of, what did I learn from this one to go to this one? What did I learn from this one to go to this one? So every piece that I do, I'm looking at older pieces to try to get a little bit more from them. So the squats started as just, they were originally vessels, and the vessel kind of grew a top to it. And then the top looked like it was staring at me the whole time, so I had to have something on the face. Face had to be something that was silly, or else I would not pay enough attention to it. So then I just wrote on the first one squat, because it was the first, it was an actual instructor that said it, that came to mind. My first instructor that taught me how to teach, Ryan Berg, at USF, he would just go into a classroom when it was really quiet and everybody's working and yell out the most random word just to do it, just to shock everybody back to working. And one time he walked in, when everyone's building these big objects that are really serious, he walked in and yelled, "Squat!" And no one knew what to do. People just stopped building. So the squat term came from him. So it's another memory tying to a person that helped me move through the creative process. So for them, I tied to Florida, I tied to old school, I tied to things that are back in my history. So like old swamps and cypress stumps and things like that. And I think that they are an entity that comes from just wanting to create. So when things are awkward, I think that's when I do best in my studio. When I'm upset at something or I'm thinking about a memory that's really nagging at me. And I think that's where they come from. They are like the awkward energy that when you're making something, they spring up. So I wanted to start making that energy as an object. So they just keep multiplying. The more awkward I feel, the more I have to build more of them, and then I have to talk to people about them, which makes it a little bit more awkward, which I think is exactly what they need. So I've made over 150 now, which I think I still need a few hundred more before they work themselves out. But I think that's kind of the point of those, is to keep me in that unhappy, weird, awkward stage. Because I think when everything is going well with me, I feel like I can't work in the studio. My studio needs to be a little off-settled in one way, shape, or form to make me feel like I'm in the right spot to make something. It's the trauma stuff, it's all the things that are linked to it, it's creativity fighting all the other stuff. And I like that in between for me. It's comfortable. And I think that's a strange thing to say, that I think trauma is comfortable for me, but it is. So, and a piece you don't see here that I will kind of pitch towards the next show. At the Dunedin Fine Arts Center, I'm going to have a piece that goes back to some of my older work when I was directly dealing with these figures. I studied salt and the process it does on ceramics. And there's going to be a piece that literally destroys itself from the inside out while growing at the same time. I think those moments of these objects will be here forever, but at the same time they capture the moment of the memory. But I love an object that just doesn't want to stay around. I think a lifespan for an object is where I need to go next. But it's kind of, you know, I've been dealing with it for 20-something plus years, making those kind of pieces. So I haven't quite worked all the kinks out of the trauma stuff yet. So.
Did you have a name when you have a collection of squats? I forget what it is.
It's a cringe.
A cringe.
Yeah, anything more than 2 squats together is a cringe. Because I want you to feel that. I think that's appropriate for squats. And I think that's the best part of my work for me, is that I get to talk to people about these things and deal with memories and thoughts and things that I've never really dealt with in any other way other than just talking to people about it. You know, I've gone through therapy, I've gone through things like that. But talking about the scenarios and talking with my family, really, about these different things brings about a completely different mindset. And especially seeing my daughter go to camp and trying to make sure she gets all the creative things she ever wants, if she ever wants to do it. You know, I don't push anything on her, but I give her access to everything. And I think it's amazing what she's doing by choice.
Do you talk to her, Deon, about what you went through? Or
She was around when my mother was still around,
Mhm.
so she got to know her a little bit, but I don't think they ever got along. She was too young to understand the personalities of most of the people in my family, because everyone is very straightforward, and if it's not serving what they're doing, then it should not be done. So when I would talk about art and creativity and things like that, then it would fall on deaf ears for most of the time, and it would be, okay, well, I'm glad you're doing well, that kind of scenario. So she never got a real personal connection before, so we talk occasionally about it, but she has a very open, like, you know, bringing up now with creativity, so she can do anything she wants, but I don't think she would ever get along with my family.
How old is she?
She's 11 now.
Going on 21.
I'm dealing with the transition to middle school as we speak, which I think is going to form several hundred more squads or something else. So, no, she is a hoot, and she is, in my mind, everything I wanted to be when I was a kid, but I didn't have the opportunity to be. So as long as she is getting what she wants, then I'm ecstatic about it. So. Whether she chooses creativity or not, if she wants to be a lawyer, that's fine with me. But
Yeah, I was
at
gonna
least
ask
she has the access.
What would your reaction be if she wanted to? I want to be an accountant.
Be the best accountant you can be, I guess. Like I can't look at numbers the same way. So yeah, as long as she has access, it doesn't matter.
Can you tell us how you made this piece?
Sure.
Yeah, like how do you build that window on a structure?
All by hand. So, do we have any ceramic people? I can speak in ceramic terms, or I can speak with, so, extrusion. So I have a machine that I can extrude entire tubes. I built it. So I can build the tubes by one form, and then these are extruded squares. So picture long tubes of squares, and cut them up, and I build from scratch. So I'll build
So
3 or
it's
4
not falling out as you're building it, it's not soft enough to fall over, right? It's like
Depends on the day. No, I know enough about ceramics now that I can control it. That's why I try to say I don't want you to see the craftsmanship.
right.
I don't want you to see the skill that it took to make some of these things.
Well, I know it is the skill.
Well, then I have to work harder on that. The idea is to make it whimsical, funny. You know, I want to talk about these subject matters by engaging you, pulling you towards it, not like if I look across the room and I see something that's a little too heavy to deal with, I don't want to engage at all. I'd rather you get close before you see the teeth inside the container. I'd rather you get close and start playing with the toys and seeing all the colorful and things like that before you start reading this, you know, the actual descriptor of the piece. Maybe you're more likely to talk about those kind of things if you see that I can be sarcastic or funny about it or things like that.
You mean we were allowed to put the Wawa on
People did it in the opening, they were tossing them into the ceiling. Yeah, feel free. They're just toys, just
It seems that a lot of comedians have, are successful because of their traumatic childhood. And I
I'm
feel
not
like
funny.
you have.
I tried that.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a pendulum swing. When you have to deal with all of that all the time, it's really nice to just be silly, wear masks, costumes. I do costuming all the time. I'm a different person for different things. Playing a rock band occasionally, dress in costume, do things like that, set design. The more you can get away from that side, the more it feels nice when the pendulum can swing and you can control it. You know, I don't have to think about those things. I can do all kinds of crazy stuff. I enjoy that part. Yes.
I'm wondering about the little purple squiggles that are like stuff like gum almost piece.
What do you wonder about?
Well, at first I wondered if they were Fruit Loops, but
Oh, nice.
I don't know what a Fruit Loop looks like. I had to ask.
Well, you're lucky then.
Yeah. I know. How could I miss? I was on Fruit Loops. Thank you,
Yeah, they're, if the pieces weren't in there, I wanted more attention being drawn to the voids of the vessel. So you're not just looking and seeing the pieces inside of it, you're seeing a couple of things around it too.
Yeah.
Maybe looking at the glazes towards the bottom, things like that. You know, I do, when you realize they're not, the texture on here is directly representational of a tooth. I actually would carve something close and pound it into there over and over and over again. So you wouldn't notice it, because I took a lot of time and thought of that, but overall it just becomes this object. But I want you to engage it by, is it a pretty color? Is it bright to you? Is it something that's useful? Is it, you know, it's a form that's comfortable for the most part? Maybe, maybe not.
And that same little stick is, you know, that sort of stuck in place on there, different color.
Yeah. Little hints of other things that can be on there. And it's cheating. I don't, if you're a ceramicist, you might notice that I'm cheating on a couple of things. These kinds, I can do 2 or 3 a month if I get everything the way I want it to go. But I don't build for time. I build for if I got enough conversation out of it. So I'll build. I don't enjoy it. I change it. I add to it. Some of them will take much longer. I have pieces that take me years before I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
And I'm not happy with it, but yeah.
What are these round pages about?
How do you contain a memory? In my head, you can't really contain it. It's changing over time. It's in your head, but you don't remember it the same way every single time. It's fluid, so how do you build a container that shows fluidity? There's an inside, there's an outside. I want the container to show you that you can go through it. It's not important that it's containing it. For me, the memory is just there, and it's changing over time. You get the little hints, the things that are in the container are almost contained by it, but it's not really contained by it. You know, it happens, the memories come back for me, and I explain it to other people, and I think they're a little more solid. And the more I talk about it, the memory congeals a little bit more, be more the bottom part of the vessel. Sometimes the memories abstract, and I just remember pain, or I just remember, you know, a sound, or things like that. That's the open part of the vessel. More fluid, lets things pass through it. If that makes sense.
Well, it's like different, like this is unconscious and this is subconscious. It's like when you get down and it's just there.
Yeah, I can't control that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to.
Yeah, I see that. No, you don't have to.
If anybody has any questions for me, I'll help one-on-one if this stuff is too heavy.
I just want to know if you've read the book Uneducated by Tara Westover. Because anyone else read that book? Does this kind of, it's a very traumatic upbringing, and she transcended it during the WERK, transcended it, and wrote this wonderful book about it. Your story reminds me of it, and I'd like to know if you're talking about it helps you. Does it help you to talk about it?
That's the whole point. Yeah.
That's the point.
Sometimes the objects don't have enough content to really get everything across they want to talk about. So then it's the conversation of what the object could be that gets it across. Then it's it's the talking part that helps. And then the object becomes something else, and I can work on it later. I think these are I'm pretty happy where they are. But I have other objects that are not quite where they need to be. They'll still go in front of an audience, and I'll get feedback, and they'll grow or change. I think the spots have been changing constantly, which I really love.
Your piece that's going to destroy itself, or it's going to be a fragile, or it'll be like
I can control it. I don't want you to know that I can control it. But I can control it, and I can have it destroy itself within a certain time period. And I'm going to have it partially destroy itself during the exhibition. Yeah, I studied a lot of science in the background of some of these things that I really dove in a little too heavy during college. And during my grad school, right before I lost like 4 members of my family to suicide and cancer, I was, working at the Malta Cancer Center, volunteering occasionally, and I studied cancer and everything about it. And then I started pulling that into the work. So that's where a lot of that salt study came from. And I get to go around and talk to other people about the salt chemistry and things like that. And I just haven't been able to get back into that until recently. And then I thought it was really ironic. I think this is kind of poignant that I was trying to tweak my recipe to control timing on the destruction for a month and a half. And I put it into an AI system, and it quotes me back, because I wrote some papers on it. So it's telling me, well, if you really want to do this, this is the website you should look at, this person is doing it. And it goes to my website, it quotes all the papers that I wrote. I'm like, okay, well that doesn't help me, and that's kind of interesting how that stuff works, and it still comes back to you, and you're the one that caused it. So, but yeah, I haven't done it in 20 years, and I remember now why I stopped doing it, because it's extremely caustic and painful and destroys everything around it. So I have a family, an isolated situation that I do it in certain small batches, do it, clean up, and then it's going to have its time, and then it's gone, and it probably won't come back again.
You seem really intentional about being a productive parent, because you're supporting your child. You're not trying to block your child, and you're aware of what you're saying, aware of what she's doing. And I think that is great.
I think that's the most creative endeavor you can have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming. Still got some daylight out.